What's going on, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Expected Bets 4, presented by the Hockey Podcast Network. On today's episode, we'll be breaking down the Montreal Canadiens. Betsky, you're supporting the gear.
Yeah.
You got
I'm
shirts for every
excited.
team, it seems like, huh?
Watch them pitter off, but
You're-
so far so good.
Yeah, personal NHL shop over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Each year I buy myself an old vintage like 90s NHL shirt with some of my winnings from capping, and this was the Montreal one I got last year.
I like it.
Excited to bust it out more this season because this is a exciting team now, and I think they could turn some heads.
Yeah, I think so for sure. Franco, I know we talked before this as well, and I think you're pretty high on the Canadiens too.
Yeah, I know what the hell's going on with the world. We're all high on the Canadiens, but can't say I own a Canadian shirt or any gear here. But yeah, I really like the moves they've made this offseason, and I think the future looks pretty bright for this team.
Yeah, hopefully this episode increases our viewership in Montreal. That would be nice. So maybe make some friends this episode. But with that being said, let's get into the team preview for the Montreal Canadiens. All right, so the Montreal Canadiens finished in last place of the Atlantic Division for a third straight season, hoping to avoid it becoming a fourth. They had 72 points last year, up from 68 in 2022-23 season, and they had 55 the year before. So I guess we can say they're headed in the right direction. Interesting team, still very young, so we do have to give them that. But they made a splash this offseason, Betsky, with kind of just not a lot of moves, but they did make a big one. Patrik Laine joins this team. What's your initial reaction to him joining this Habs squad?
Well, they got him for pretty much free, so that's not bad. But I mean, this makes this top 6, top 9 pretty dangerous. I mean, that when you see it on paper, it looks pretty good. And if he shows up and can play the way we've seen him play in some of his first seasons when he was with Winnipeg, that makes his team very scary. Now, they're going to need to work on a little bit of the defensive responsibilities up and down that lineup, but you're starting to see that kind of develop. I mean, Suzuki's always been a good two-way center.
Yeah.
Slafkovsky's now going to be another year into the league. It could be interesting to see if he starts to feel a little bit more confident in pushing some of the big boys around, because it tends to take power forwards a little bit longer to develop and kind of get that man strength, if you will. Dvorak's always been a great two-way center. Josh Anderson's a great two-way player. I mean, up and down that lineup, you got some guys that are going to be able to fill in and kind of cover for somebody like Patrik Laine and Cole Caulfield now. So feel a lot more confident that he's coming on the team this year. Obviously, he wasn't on the team last year's, but now you're kind of seeing this whole unit take shape. The scoring is kind of there up and down the lineup, where last season it really found very, very top heavy. So pretty exciting there. I think it'll be interesting to see if the blue line can kind of keep up, though.
Yeah, I think this offensive core is certainly pretty interesting heading into the season. The one issue, like you'd mentioned, Franco, is going to be their defense and goaltender situation. Lane Hudson joins the team as a rookie out of BU. Matheson, Gooley, Hudson, Savard. Interesting defensive unit they have here. And I think this is going to be kind of what makes or breaks their season.
Well, I like the fact, if this is how they stay, that they're pairing Hudson with Savard, who's a very sound defensive player. He kind of had a little bit of a down year last year, it felt like. But I like the idea of getting him on a line with him. And Matheson, we know, can produce offensively as well. He's a guy that puts up points and can score goals here and there too. So it's kind of a nice little bit of a balance here. They extended Xhekaj and Barron as well. I think that you can feel good of, again, where they're going and what they're building here. And if these guys that are younger, on the younger side on the blue line, can take another step forward, Xhekaj's that big, tough guy. If he can kind of limit the penalties and maybe even work his way into a top 4 role with this team as well, this could be better than we're thinking. Right now on paper, we're a little worried, right? But all it takes is for a couple of these guys to take a step up, or Savard to maybe return to a little bit of his better defensive form as well. And Hudson's going to provide that spark along with Matheson offensively to really kind of drive the play with these forwards. I feel like this is a team that might be able to outscore teams despite their defensive woes.
Yeah, and they also have a few other defensemen too, kind of waiting in the wings, and Jordan Harris, Jaden Struble, and Logan Malou as well. So they can kind of plug and play with that bottom two, depending on how their season goes, which not many teams can say that they can kind of get that rotation of that young defensive men, interested and kind of get them crucial NHL minutes heading into the season. Betsky, Montebo, and Primo are it's an interesting tandem. I'm just going to kind of leave it at that here.
Yeah.
Again, kind of another worry area for this team heading forward. I think next year, if this team does progress as we see fit, I think that's going to be their main area that they try to address, unless one of them really has a breakout season.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I mean, this is where you kind of are living and dying by your team success with the goaltending a bit here, because the blue line's got some dynamic kind of pieces there.
Yep.
Same with the forwards, obviously, but this is obviously the weak spot to me. Montembeault had a pretty decent season last year, all things considering, but it's hard to have a ton of faith that these guys are going to be able to kind of win games outright for their team. I think this is definitely going to be a thing where the whole unit needs to help prop up the goalies. And maybe I'm totally wrong and one of them has a completely crazy breakout season, but goalies are voodoo. I never like to try to predict how good one's going to be or how bad one's going to be.
Yep.
But with a lot of goalies outside the really elite ones, it seems like after a good year, you get some regression. And if there's some regression on Montembeault, that we can start to see some cracks here. I'm actually surprised there's not a vet waiting in the wings or one that they decide to pick up instead. But we'll see. This is kind of the wait and see position to me.
Yeah. For Suzuki and Caulfield, I'm sure this roster, at least it's kind of like the light at the end of the tunnel for these two after kind of struggling the past few seasons. But now it's kind of almost their team. Franco, do you think they kind of start to develop and especially kind of get some chemistry with Slavkovsky on that top line? It feels like if there's any kind of a do or die season and they really want to turn this franchise around in terms of a legitimate playoff contender, this is kind of it.
Yeah, I mean, Suzuki kind of became that really true 1C last year. And I know there have been some question marks about it going into the season, and he started kind of slow, but really caught fire. And that line was productive as hell during it. It was a nice stretch there where it seemed like they were scoring every single night, and we were getting Slavkovsky pointed like plus money. And yeah, it was nice. So yeah, I'm excited for it. I think Suzuki's kind of an underrated player at this point in his career. I think he should be kind of spoken more in that like higher tier than where he's really kind of ranked, at least what we saw last year. So again, he's still relatively young. He can continue to get better. And another year, Slavkovsky, like you said, growing into that body. He's a big dude. Like maybe don't take some bad penalties, learn a little bit from last year and use that body to your advantage, right? And we know Caulfield can score. So that's doesn't need to be fixed there. I think.
Yeah.
I think it's exciting.
For sure. All right. Before we get into the best and worst case scenario for the Montreal Canadiens, I'd like to talk to you about our sponsor, BetterHelp. This episode of Expected Bets 4 is brought to you by BetterHelp. Have you ever stopped to think about something new you'd love to learn? As adults, we don't always make the time to learn we used to when we were kids. Kids are constantly exploring and growing, but somewhere along the way, life gets busy and we lose some of that curiosity. What's something you've been wanting to dive into? Maybe it's cooking, picking up a new language, or even figure out your golf game to finally beat your new friend. Just because we're older doesn't mean we have to stop growing. In fact, therapy can help you reconnect with that sense of wonder. It reminds you that your back-to-school moment can happen at any time. Therapy is not just for people who have gone through something major. It's for anyone looking to be the best version of themselves. Therapy can help you learn positive ways to cope with stress, set healthy boundaries, and tackle challenges with more confidence. It's really about giving yourself the tools to thrive and grow, no matter what stage of life you're in. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/THPN today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/THPN. Now back to the show. All right, getting into the best and worst case scenario for the Montreal Canadiens. Franco, the best case, maybe they make the playoffs, but I don't think they're there yet. I think it's just kind of a big growing year for this young core to continue to develop, and maybe they kind of shorten that gap, get out of the bottom of the Atlantic Division, and maybe next year have something positive to kind of that they can build towards next season.
Yeah, I agree. I think they can be kind of like in that Sabres type of last season where they weren't eliminated until like the last week or so, right? Maybe they are in it, and who knows? I mean, this is a team that I would assume should have some cap space to an extent, right? So maybe if they do feel like they can make that push, maybe they trade for a goaltender, or maybe they get a blue liner or an extra winger, whatever it is, to really prop this team up. I mean, I think if Montebo performs like he did last year that defense in front of him last year was not good. Let's just put it that way. And he still seemed like a pretty good goaltender. Like if you were wanting to back Montreal in any kind of way, you were making sure he was in net before you did so. So I don't know. I think that there is a possibility they could be in that middling group where I think there's just going to be this hodgepodge, and you win a couple overtime games instead of lose them, you could be right in that playoff hunt at the end of the season. So I think they probably do end up on the outside of the playoffs looking in, but maybe they do sneak in.
Yeah. Betsky, the worst case scenario for this Montreal Canadiens teams, I think starts with line A, and then from there it could get pretty bad quickly. But I want to hear your thoughts on what might happen if everything goes wrong in Montreal.
Yeah, I mean, close your eyes and paint yourself a picture of this forward group without Doc, Line A, Josh Anderson, Dvorak, who have all had injury issues before, maybe even Gallagher getting injured again. And it thins out real quick, especially even if you think of one of the top three guys on that top line, a Caulfield, Suzuki, or Slavkovsky injury. And this is starting to look a lot different. I mean, you can say this about most teams, but we just talked about the Florida Panthers. If they lose to Chuck, are you really that worried that they can't at least be a good team? I mean, this is kind of like a fragile core where one of the prime guys being out could really take them a step back. And this team went from being kind of exciting to very exciting with that Line A addition. And this is a player who's struggled to kind of stay in seasons. So do you have to temper your expectations? Because if he's out for a significant amount of time, it just kind of looks like last year's roster with some more young kids making the team. So it's definitely a kind of wait and see core. There's a lot of elements that kind of remind me of Buffalo, but Buffalo's a little bit further advanced than them. But, I think this is one of those teams that really, regardless of the outcome, you have to be happy with, because if Montreal gets another top 5 pick, who's really going to be complaining to kind of just add another piece to that prospect pool that they have. And if they get closer to a bottom 12 pick or are fighting for a wild card spot until the end of the season, fans are going to be excited because they had an exciting season. So it's kind of one of those win-win scenarios for the team.
Yeah, I think the fans would would be more inclined to root for a potential wild card spot at this stage, given the past few seasons, for sure. All right, before we get into some team and player futures, I'd like to talk to you about our sponsor, DraftKings. NFL Week 1 is here, and a new season means new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like picking a player to score a touchdown. The NFL season kicks off on Thursday night with the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Baltimore Ravens. The Chiefs are currently favored by 3, with the total being set at 46.5. If you're looking to place your bet on Week 1 NFL action, head over to DraftKings. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the best place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you just bet $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Only at DraftKings, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms.
The Montreal Canadiens regular season points total is set at 76.5. Last year they had 76. This roster improves. We've talked about the Atlantic Division kind of narrowing down in terms of the gap between the best and worst team. I don't know about you, but this 76.5 is awfully tempting to take. I'll start with you, Franco.
Yeah, I think I lean over. Like I said, I think we haven't even really talked about Doc, but if he's healthy, I mean, he put up a pretty good season his last year in Montreal, 38 points in 50 so games. He could. Again, there's a lot of stuff that's on the hinge of this team being very good or very bad, but 76.5 seems attainable, so I don't mind the over here.
Yeah, Betsky, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't hate it either, but it would be kind of weird to think of a division without one team having less than 77 points. So if you really think they're the worst team in this division, that means all the teams are pretty spaced out evenly. But again, last season this was the case for this division. So if all the teams kind of take a step up that were on the bottom and the teams that are at the top kind of lose some points because they're losing games to these teams that are improving, yeah, it's pretty easy to see. It means that Montreal is going to have to play really well when they're playing outside of the division and obviously within the division as well here, though. So it seems like right on that fringe of what I feel comfortable with. It's really kind of a coin flip here. I'm going to go against the grain here, and with all the potential injury issues they may have, I'm going to say I like the under a little bit more. Again, that doesn't mean that Montreal is going to look bad. I think they're going to have way better, way more exciting games that they just lose maybe in overtime, or they just goaltending falls apart or something along that lines. But I think this product on ice is going to be much better, even if the point totals are very similar.
Talking about that worst case scenario seems like it got in your head a little bit, and you started to reconsider your position on Montreal.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're the GM in Montreal, right, and let's say Montembeault goes out for a while, are you really racing out there to try to pick up a goaltender to pick up the pieces, or you're like, well, couldn't hurt to have another top pick entering this type of team? I mean, think about it. This team's going to have Demidov probably next season. Reinbacher maybe making the team next season. There's a lot more kids coming up. So maybe you even use a high pick that you get because the team didn't outperform what you were hoping and move it for a true difference maker in goaltending.
As I say, a potential trade piece too. If, like you said, if all things go wrong here, try to acquire at least a goaltender with a little bit of experience.
Or maybe an older top defenseman too.
Yeah. I think the playoff, division, conference, and Stanley Cup markets are off the board here for us. So I will move straight ahead to the player point futures. Cole Caulfield is listed at 68.5. Slavkovsky at 57.5, Suzuki at 78.5, and Lane Hudson, the rookie, listed at 38.5. Franco, you're pumping your fist. I'm going to toss this one to you.
Yeah, I'm grabbing Hudson for sure at 38.5. That just seems like a gimme at this point. They're going to give him run. He's going to play on the power play.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love that number. It seems way too low. As long as he avoids injury and they don't, I can't see a situation where they send him down. Like that would be the worry for a young player like this. But given what this team is and the structure of it, they have no reason to send him down. Like let the guy play, let him play that on that top power play unit. 30.5 points with Line Caulfield racking up goals on that power play. Hell yeah.
Yeah, Caulfield over 68.5 also seems pretty interesting. So last season, I think he had 65, which was his career best. Another year to develop chemistry with Suzuki and Slavkovsky. Betsky, did any of those point futures jump out to you?
I'm going to lay off the Caulfield one for two reasons. He is a smaller player. He's had some injury issues. And what's not to say that Line A takes that top wing spot or top power play, kind of sitting in the office at the dot spot, and kind of takes away from a little bit of Caulfield's production. Maybe they'll try to kind of split those minutes a little bit more. We don't necessarily know how all those lines are going to fit yet. So the one that stands out for me, to be honest, is Slavkovsky. I mean, this is a 8 point jump, from his last year's point total, which was at 50. If he's truly going to take that next step, I think this is a 60-point winger. That's the one that I like, especially plus money or even money. That was really tempting to me.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, that's minus 115. I was looking at his goals.
Yeah, the player goals, as you mentioned, Caulfield's at 31.5, Slavkovsky at 25.5, Suzuki at 31.5, and Patrick Line at 26.5. Betsky, you mentioned that Line may kind of creep into the production of Caulfield. Does his goal total at 26.5 interest you at all, or are you kind of going to a different player?
Well, I think that line is very low for a reason. Okay. There's a lot of risk involved.
Yep.
But man, that should be an easy one for him to surpass as long as he gets a full season. So this is a guy who's put up 44 goals in his sophomore season in the NHL, 36 his rookie season, 30 the year after that, and 28 in his first 4 seasons in the league. He had a best of 26 goals his second year at Columbus, and we just haven't seen him be able to stay on the ice enough pretty much ever since he got moved from Winnipeg. So really what you're doing here is gambling that you're getting a healthy Line A, and otherwise that should be a fairly easy goal total for him to hit. That may be my favorite as far as just the value you are getting for the price. Now, again, lots of risk associated here, but he only played 5 games last season. 6 games, sorry. Or I'm sorry, 18. 18 games last season. Hopefully that means he's had a lot of time to recover and kind of get his life and personal situation together and is ready for having another big year. So,
yeah. Franco, did any of those goal markets jump out to you?
Yeah, I like the risk on Line here as well. I mean, we know his talent level. Yeah, his talent level is insane. And even if he plays like 70 games, like I think he could get to that number. So
yeah,
I would probably be betting his goal prop at least relatively often to start the season. Let's put it that way. And honestly, I could see Caulfield even getting to that 32. It's a little high, but I see lots of goals with this team, and I don't mind getting some overs here.
Yeah, in terms of the trophies, the markets, I think there's only really 2 that we need to discuss here. The Calder, Lane Hudson, 10-1 here. Obviously on offensive defenseman from BU here. Kind of interesting. We saw Faber kind of get snubbed last year. Bedard wins it. But Franco, did you have any thoughts on dipping into the Hudson for the Calder?
Yeah, I wish the price was a little bit better, but
That's
10 to
fair.
1 doesn't seem too bad. It's tough though. You got a couple forwards that we're going to talk about later that
Yeah.
have some awesome upside, but 10 to 1's not too bad. He should produce, like I said, 30.5 was his point total. I like that a lot. The other one that we're not really talking about is Martin St. Louis to win Jack Adams at 35
Ooh.
to 1. Again, if we see a substantial increase from this team, is it out of the question here from them? They could
Yeah.
be
Would
a
they have
fun
to
team
make
to
the
watch.
playoffs?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I guess it would probably have to be a playoff run to get there, but that's a hell of a lot nicer than them making the playoffs at plus 750. You're getting a plus 3,500. So maybe that's the way to go if you think this team could compete for the playoff spot.
Yeah, you'd almost think you'd have to be a finalist, especially if they do make the playoffs and you get them at 35 to 1. That's not a bad way to approach that bet. Betsky Suzuki is 30 to 1 for the Selkie. Is that something that interests you, or are you staying away?
Yeah, that's probably my favorite player that has been brought up so far for winning it. Kind of like Franco has mentioned before, it's kind of a award that it has a lot of different factors in it, that some are tangible, some are intangible. I mean, the award kind of speaks for itself in that capacity. A Montreal team that improves a lot, and him becoming kind of maybe one of the league's better two-way guys. That kind of does interest me just a touch. I mean, that's something to maybe sprinkle. And I do want to point something out, because I do believe Demidov has been around as an option for the Calder. He has signed for SKA in the KHL, so he is not going to be playing next year. So do not waste your money. I'm sure those would get voided, but just in case anything weird shenanigans happen and then your money gets locked up for a while, just avoid that. Just don't take it.
Yeah. The only reason I'm not interested in Suzuki and the Selkie is because the plus minus does matter here. Last year, they're
Yeah.
plus 14. We talked about this team that they can score. They do have that prominent, or starting to develop kind of a prominent offense here, but that defensive core and goaltending does worry me. I think he's a good enough guy on the draw. I think he's going to have enough points to kind of matter in this race, but he can't be minus 14 and win this award.
No. So not my favorite, but
No.
if you're looking for something with a little bit juicier odds, maybe even keep your eye on it. And if they're outperforming and Monbeau shows up and they're playing closer games than you expect, then maybe it's one of those things that kind of grab in mid-season or something.
6. It seems like being on a good team does matter, just given that plus minus, because Barkov and Bergeron. So the team does have to be kind of a playoff contender at the same point there.
Yeah.
Closing thoughts here. I think this team's going to be very exciting to watch this year. Should be fun. Player props are going to be out the wazoo. This is a team you're going to want to kind of target. So, Franco, your closing thoughts on the Canadiens?
Yeah, I think it's going to be something you're going to take advantage of early in the season. I think we're going to see a lot of plus money point props and high number goal props for these guys, especially line. Like if we're getting like a plus 180 or plus 200 for a line goal in these first few games, I'm going to be ripping that every single time. We'll see. We'll see where they put it, but I mean, I could imagine Hudson Points being a nice plus 140 type of area. Slavkovsky remaining in that plus 110, plus 120 area. If that's the case, I'm going to be betting them a lot. And I think we're just going to be betting overs, or maybe their team totals over a lot. And I think, again, I think you're going to be wanting to watch this team on any given night when you have 4 or 5 games, maybe even a 6-game slate, and you're sitting there deciding, okay, what game do I want to watch tonight? You might be flicking on the Montreal Canadiens this season, and it's kind of crazy to think about, but it's awesome.
Hearing those French broadcasters. Betsky, what are your closing thoughts on the Canadiens?
Yeah, I mean, Franco pretty much said everything I want to say. This is going to be that type of team to circle, underappreciated players, a team that maybe a lot of people are thinking still bad, quote unquote. And this is a team that looks like they're ready to start really producing and turning heads. And grab it early because it is going to change. I remember a couple of years ago, someone that kind of broken out 2 years in a row now, Clayton Keller, used to be one of those guys you could get his point prop at a reasonable rate. And by the end of last season, he's a minus 180-ish or worse. And it takes the books a little bit of time to adjust, especially in the NHL. So jump on it, build up that bankroll, enjoy it while it lasts.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where Hudson opens in terms of the shots on goal market. If he's at 2.5 from the get-go and you get plus money on him those first few games, it may be worth your while to sprinkle on that. Even Line A too. It's going to be interesting to see where they price him come game one. So
I guess my only concern with Line A and Caulfield is if they really take away their own shots on the power play, or if now you just got two weapons on both sides, just hammering goaltenders left and right, literally.
Yeah. All right. Well, we appreciate everyone for listening to this episode of Expected Bets 4, presented by the Hockey Podcast Network. Be sure to check out our socials at Expected Bets 4 on Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. Again, we appreciate you guys for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.